welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. Sorry about the red paint that's all over my hands. Today we are going to go over the Zorn palette. So this is a very minimal palette where we're just using 4 colors and we are going to be painting a green apple. Now the Zorn palette is a little bit more subdued. It's hard to get this bright green. Our green might look a little bit more like this green because we actually don't have the color blue in our paints that we're going to be using. And that's why it's called the Zorn palette. This was actually a palette that a Swedish artist used named Anders Zorn. You should look up some of his paintings. They are amazing. And he used these 4 colors. And I don't think he always used them, but it's called the Zorn palette because I think he used them a lot. And it's really nice, just minimal palette to use, especially if you're starting to paint. And it's different than the traditional red, yellow, and blue because we are just going to be using yellow, red, and black and white. So we are missing our blue. All right, so the 4 colors we're going, oh, right in my paint. The 4 colors we're going to be using are Ivory Black, Cadmium Red Medium, and then Yellow Ochre, and this is actually Titanium White. So these are the 4 colors. So we are missing blue, and the reason we're missing blue is because Ivory Black actually has a little bit of a cooler tint to it, so it actually kind of reads as a blue. It's definitely not as good bright as a normal blue, but that is this palette. It's not extremely bright. The only brightness really we get is this Cadmium Red Medium. The colors you can also use, I think that when Anders Zorn painted originally, he used Vermillion, but we are just going to use Cadmium Red because it's a great, whoops, sorry, camera. It's a great substitute to use. Also, if you can't find Yellow Ochre, you can use Yellow Medium, and that's actually going to be a little bit brighter. All right, so you need these 4 colors or one of the ones I just told you. Also in the comment section below, I'll list these colors and the colors that he used and substitutions as well. You need something to paint on. It's pretty important in oil painting. And I'm just going to be using these canvas sheets of, it's like canvas paper. I would use 2 of these just because we're going to be doing some practices on them. I'm going to be using just this piece that I have from the other day, just part of it that I didn't use. And when you're using oil paints, you need to have some turpentine to clean your brush off. So I have some turpentine in this brush with this, in this bottle with this coil, and this is what I use to clean my brushes off with. I'm going to be using Liquin. I like to use it as a medium to extend my paints, and also it's just a great medium to use to get it to dry a little bit faster. I'm just going to be using these 2 brushes because honestly they're the only ones I could find, and to be honest, these are acrylic brushes. These are not even oil brushes. So clearly I need to go get some more supplies, but going to the art supply store is not something I do a ton anymore, so I just need to restock my supply of these. And you need something to clean your brushes off on, so just an old rag works great. And you can use a pencil for sketching. I don't love to use a pencil when I'm painting on a canvas. I like to just do my sketch in paint. But on something like this, or if I'm painting on a wood panel, then I'll totally just use a pencil. It works great. And I think that's it for supplies. Let's get started. So before we paint the apple, I just think it's good to kind of do a little bit of experimenting. So let's use the colors that we have and let's try to mix them just kind of like I did here, and see if we can get some nice colors with them. So let's turn this way. I can move these now, so we don't really need to see that. All right, so first let's just see what happens when let's try to make our secondary colors. And I need some Liquin on here. So it's just, I like how it just stays together. If I tried to pour turpentine on this, it would spread like crazy and go everywhere. Okay, and just ignore that and ignore these. These clearly, this is me trying to do exactly what we're doing right now. And it's still wet. Let's see if I can get like a piece of this that's not painted on. Nah, that's okay. Let me just get this open so I can use it. Also, make sure when you're using oil paints that you're in a ventilated room. These fumes are not good. And I don't know if this cadmium red actually has cadmium in it, but it could, so let's just be careful. With watercolors, I would tell you to set everything up on the left side, right side. If you're right-handed, same thing here. If you're right-handed, just put everything on the right side. Left-handed, move it to the left side. Okay, so let's just see what happens when we mix our yellow with our red. Are we going to be able to get a nice orange color? And then let's just see what happens when we add a little bit of white. I'm going to use a little Liquin here. That's a nice orangey color. Okay, and now let's see what happens when we try to make purple. Normally we'd use red and blue, but we don't have blue, so let's just see what happens when we use some black. It's very dark. So let's just put that dark part right here. Maybe a little more black, actually. It looks a little brown to me, but and then here is just adding a little bit of white to it. I mean, it's reading a little purpley. I mean, really, color is subjective, right? It just depends on what's around it. And let's try to make our green now. Also, you can totally paint a red apple if you want. I just want to see what happens if we put red next to this. Does it make it look more purple? I don't know. Or if we add a pink, I just want to see what happens if we added a light pink over here. Now, does it read purple? Maybe. This is a great time, just experiment. Try to make your secondary colors orange, violet, and green. Okay, so for green, we're going to grab some of our yellow and a little bit of our black, trying not to get any red in it or else you'll totally get a brown. Wow. That actually looks way better than the green I mixed last night. I'm just going to add some Liquin and some white to it, and we'll just see what happens when we get a little bit lighter. Also, I think it's good to kind of play with your colors a little bit. So for this green, which actually looks so much better, that's a pretty good green when we don't even have blue. Last night, I mean, that's as green as, maybe it does look green, I don't know. But I like to just put these colors next to it just to kind of see the colors that we're getting and how we're getting them. Up here, I might just put this next to that as well, just to kind of see what those look like. All right, so we know how to go from dark to light, and we know how to mix some of these colors. So you saw I was adding a little bit of Liquin to get it to be a little bit smoother and just extends my color a little bit. Before we paint the apple, I just want to go over really quick oil painting tips. You can paint a background color, you can paint a background color if you want. You can just do your outline and then just start painting on it, which is what I'm going to do, but typically I do like a background color because it shines through. One thing you want to make sure, one thing actually that I've read, I remember when I started painting with oils and they said to paint dark to light, so the opposite of watercolor. Watercolors we usually paint light to dark. They said when you're doing oil painting to paint dark to light because you can layer those lighter colors on top. And so you're going to be using, with your darker colors, more turpentine, and with your lighter colors, a little bit more linseed oil, if that makes sense. But some painters actually like to put the medium colors on first, and then it gives them context for where those darks and those lights need to go. And that actually works really well for me. You should just, experiment and see what you like. If you do not have an apple to look at, you can go to MrOtterStudio.com, and if you go to the blog, I'm going to have these pictures that I've taken of this apple there so that you can see them. I'm going to be using, I think, this one that I took of this apple. Whoop, in focus. So you can find these there. If you want to use them, you can, but you can grab an apple if you have one, or you can use the picture that I have. Or, honestly, just paint from your head. If you know what an apple looks like, maybe you just can do it. What I liked about this apple, though, is that, it kind of has it's not just a green apple. There's red, these spots. Anyway, stem. All right, so let's grab our paper and let's get started. When I say paper, I guess it's canvas, just ignore that little bump. And then I'll just turn this so it's on the bottom. Okay. And make sure you have your supplies kind of set up on the right. I'm gonna zoom out in the beginning just so you can see how I set it up. So I have my container with my turpentine right here. I have some Liquin already on here, so I don't really need that. I have my image, or you can just be looking at your apple. Brushes, I'm gonna be just using this little flat brush and this little round. It kind of comes to a point. I don't know, we'll see how that works out. But the first thing we want to do is sketch this apple. So grab your pencil and just go ahead and draw that apple in as big or as small as you want it to be. And this apple was pretty lopsided, I have to say. So the reason I like to do this with an apple is because it's a pretty simple shape. Okay, so that stem comes up out of the middle, and then I'm just going to change the background a little bit on this one. So I like the background on this one a little bit better, so I'm just going to use that background. And then you can kind of indicate, some shading in here as well, and some highlights if you want. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in so you can kind of see the apple sketch a little bit more. And also make sure you have a rag close because you're going to be using it most likely. Okay, let's go ahead and put our medium tones in. So I'm going to be making just a green, and remember this green is not going to be as vibrant as this green. It's going to be more like this green that we mixed up here, and that's okay. So if you look at this, where is a medium tone? It's like somewhere in there. So let's go ahead and just mix up that color. We have our black and our yellow. Okay, so I have like a nice medium color here, and I'm just going to put it on this apple. Also, when you're painting anything, I think it's important to kind of figure out where your light source is. So for this apple, it's actually kind of coming straight a little bit from this side. That's why the shadow's over there. Okay, and then we could either put in our shadows or our highlights. Now that we kind of have this middle area, let's go ahead and put in some of the medium areas in here. Also, you'll notice I'm not paying too much attention to my edges. You can really clean them up with your background, and I like to do that. Okay, so to make the darker areas, I'm just going to add a little bit more black. That's a lot of black. Way more than I wanted to add. Your darker colors tend to kind of take over these lighter colors for sure. Okay, so I've just started to add a little bit of, instead of white, I'm just adding yellow to it because I still want it to be dark. And over here we kind of have a shadow actually inside of here. Coming up and out. And then we have a shadow on this side of the apple. Okay, so we have like this shadow in. And now let's go ahead and grab let's make it lighter now. Let's do the opposite. And grab I'm going to actually add more yellow still to this. I need to probably move this over so you can see it a little bit better when I'm mixing up. So I'm adding more yellow. Kind of placing it next to what I just painted. And then I'm going to add white. And it's starting to read a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to add a little bit more black and white. And let's see what this looks like next to our, so this is still pretty dark actually. It's just not as yellow. Okay, so we need more white. This is why it's kind of nice to have those medium areas in there to start with. And then one thing that's cool about this apple is I really like how it has these like red highlights. So I can see a bunch of red highlights over there. I just want to add this light area right here. So to get those areas, I'm just going to dip into my red and mix it into this highlight color. Let's make sure, it's hard for me to tell if this is in focus. And then there's this red area on this side. But it's actually lighter than that, so let's add. Sorry about my plate. So now it's almost like this pink, and I'm going to come in on this side and add it on the edge, and you can kind of see it here as well. Okay, so I kind of have these highlights. It's not as bright as I want it to be. So now I'm going to go back into this green color I have right here and add white to it. This is the nice thing. I think the one thing, not the one, but one thing that I love about oil painting is layering the colors like this. It's just so easy to blend them because it's oil, right? And you get these nice smooth areas. Okay, so I'm just gonna add this lighter area up here. And I'm going to get it even lighter. And just really, I'm trying to look at the photo and get some of these shadows in. Okay, sometimes after you add your highlights, you need to come back in and add your shadows. But before I do that, let's paint in this stem really quick because it's just, I feel like it just needs to happen. So to make brown, all we do is we take the same green color and we just add a little bit of red to it. And if it looks too purple, just add more yellow. And you can usually get a pretty good brown that way. Too yellow, add more red. And then we're just going to paint this stem in. And we'll get some highlights on the stem to kind of make it stand out a lot more than it is right now. So let's just get some of these shadows back into some of these areas. Sometimes when you add your highlights, you can erase them. So I'm just going to get some darker colors back on my brush. And you can do this with me, you can do it on your own. I don't know if it's helpful for you to see me do it, or if you should probably just start, you know? So I'm just putting in these shadows again. And then now we want to add some of the serious shading and highlights. So what I'm going to do really quickly with my paintbrush is there are some highlights on the stem they're really going to make it stand apart from the apple. And they're actually on the inside of it. I don't know why, but looking at the picture, they're in here. So I'm just adding this highlight inside the stem. And then what I'm going to do is add this highlight, and I need a lot of white for this. If I have just pure white, it would actually be great. And I'm going to add this highlight right here. So it's really subtle, but you can kind of see that highlight on there. And I want to add a little bit more of this pink color over here. And you can come in and you can add these little light dimples if you want to. Sometimes it's good just to kind of indicate some of that texture in there. Oh, and I just got rid of my shadow, so I need to add that again. And I'm gonna make around the stem just a little bit darker to make it stand off. You just wanna make sure you can see the different elements. If anything's too bold or you don't I don't want my stem to be the focus clearly of this. You know, how you do it is just to have to make it a little bit more subtle. And I'm still working with these shadows, and I might add this darker one. Since my paints are still wet, I can make that as dark as I want. And then I'm just gonna add a dark shadow over here, really dark. It's going to be coming just onto the table. And this is where I'm going to be using my Liquin to thin it out. Some people say it's hard to get a fine line in oil, but if you use enough Liquin, you can do it. And if you want to add more of these like dimples in here, you know, you feel free to do like in here if you want to just like, I mean, it's hard to know what's going to be lighter, right? You can put some texture in the shadows. I think that's helpful. Okay, let's go ahead and just paint a gray area for the table. You can use your, you can kind of refine the shape a little bit now. We're going to be painting a background, but if you want to just refine it quickly. You know, with your brush. Okay, let's go ahead and get this background on here. I feel like this is the easy part. I'm just going ahead, I'm gonna grab my Mars Black and I'm using, maybe I'll make it a little bit gray. I can even just add some yellow to it to do that. And I'm just gonna paint in my background. So you just wanna cover it. The nice thing with this also, and oil paints, is when I paint in this background, it's really easy for me to change my shape and make it maybe a little bit more what I want it to be. And if you're having a hard time getting a nice edge, just use a little bit of Liquin. It's almost like using water for watercolor. So you just want to come in close to your apple or whatever fruit you're painting. If you're not painting an apple, that's totally fine. And I have 5 minutes to finish this, so let's see if I can get it done. Okay, so see how I accidentally painted over my apple. Yikes, okay. So now I need a little bit of this darker color, and I want to just You can make the edges softer or harder. That sometimes will make or break a painting, for sure. And I'm using Liquin just to make my paint go a little bit further. And anywhere in my background that it just like draws too much attention, I will usually just go in and smooth it out. You can use tape actually as a border when you do oil painting, just like you can with your watercolors. Oh no. Again. I kind of like that soft edge, but that's okay. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in on this so you can just see it a little bit better around the apple. Let me zoom out just so it's like right around it. Okay. So I'm just kind of leaving a white border around it, and now let's grab our white. And we could make like a gray table, or sometimes I just kind of mix whatever's left, you know? And this will be my tablecloth area. Probably could be a lot lighter. Just be careful around those edges. I wasn't as careful as I should have been before. The nice thing with oil paints too is look how it just is so smooth and spreads so well. I mean, I love painting with watercolors, but it's so different painting with oils. And don't worry, if you haven't painted that shadow in yet, you can still add it. So I'm just grabbing this color, adding a really, really simple background. And then you can kind of look at it and see, like, do we need darker darks in here? Do you want the stem to stand out a little bit more? Did we miss a highlight? Do I need to make the tablecloth a little bit higher in this because it is on the other side? Probably. Probably needs to come up to about right there. And then I don't have the complete shadow, so I'm just going to try to figure out where it might have gone. And I don't want my edges to be hard back here. I really want them to just be super soft, and so you don't even really pay attention to it. Okay, now what I would do is just kind of come back in with my smaller brush and paint in any details, for example, like these highlights. I really want a white highlight on there so bad, so I'm just gonna come in and try to paint it in. So the very last step is you want to kind of add highlights. Like I added these whites here. You can kind of reshape things, adjust your background if things are kind of standing out too much for you in any areas and like distracting, then you might want to kind of smooth it out. For example, like there's a lot going on in there and I do not want like a halo around the apple. So I'm just kind of smoothing it out. That's the nice thing with oil paints is you have time to do that. But we've got this nice painting. This did take a long time and I hope you stuck with it. That's a long time to do a tutorial with me, 30 minutes. Haven't made a video this long for a long time. But I feel like for demonstrations like these, I could speed it up, but it's kind of nice to just paint it together. Here's another example of a green apple, and I took some at the art teacher thing I was at where we did this, and so I'll show you some of those. But also go ahead and try to paint a red apple using this palette. Why not? Remember, if you don't have an apple, you can just go to my website and you're probably like, these don't look like each other. You're right, yours probably looks a lot better. And I feel like this area needs to be reshaped. But hopefully you kind of got the gist of painting on kind of medium tones, adding your dark areas, your light areas, and then the details very last. And this palette I've heard is great for painting people as well. So look up this artist. His name is Anders Zorn, and again, he's going to be in the comments below. You can see some of his paintings and what he's done with this technique, and you know, try his technique on your own and see if you like it. If you do, then it's super nice to use a limited palette when you're just starting out, because a limited palette means just less to choose from, which I feel like when you're beginning, that is a good thing. There's a lot of choices you could make, and it's nice to just have that part simplified. But thank you so much for sticking with me. I'd love to see your paintings. A pear would work great for this as well, or grapes, something like that. I'd love to see your work. Post it to Instagram using Mr. Otter Studio, hashtag Mr. Otter Studio, or hashtag Mr. Otter Studio Oil. That's where I'm going to be trying to find these oil paintings. And again, in the comment section below, post questions you have about oil painting, maybe some things you would like to do, and I look forward to reading those. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week.